Oh, all right. We are live. Hi, everyone. I hope you are having a good day so far, wherever you are joining from. And I'm just going to take a second, make sure everything is set up right for the show today. But thank you so much for joining me live. I'm excited about today's topic. I'm always excited to come on and share these things with all of you. I'm just going to take a second before I dive into how to have a healthy marriage relationship and what we'll be talking about today. I'm just going to take a moment and make sure the chat is live. Hi, Abraham. Thanks so much for being here today. And I think we're good. Check my audio. Right now it looks like we're good. So as I have penned, hi, Stevie O. Nice to see you. Hi, Mike. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I appreciate you guys are always here. It's so nice to have you each week. I'm gonna now I know things are working all right. I'm gonna close the chat screen and close it down. Well, just put it down, minimize it on my screen. As I have in my comment at the top, how I like to do my live shows on Saturday is that I will teach for a little bit on the topic, and then at the end, get my mic right here. And then at the end of the stream, I will take a look at the chat box and see if there are some constructive questions and comments that would add to the discussion today. I do my best with that part. So keep it respectful in the chat box of each other. And let's have a good show today. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in. We're talking about how to have a healthy marriage relationship today. And what I really want to, I guess, not why I want to share this today. That's where I wanted to go. Why I want to share this is I want to talk about the fundamentals and foundational concepts that I teach about how to have a healthy marriage that are very, very different than what we see in marriage counseling, what we see in mainstream psychology, because we've been sold a concept of ideas in marriage counseling, in mainstream psychology, that doesn't deal with the fundamental issues. They deal with the symptoms in a marriage. So we might think of things like the symptoms of a marriage are communication, intimacy, trust, respect, and all the things we might go to marriage counseling and share with a counselor about the issues and problems that we have in a relationship. And we try to work on those symptoms, and it never deals with the real issues. The other problem with marriage counseling and traditional psychology when it comes to relationships is that it creates a codependency of needing another to change and putting our happiness, putting our experience of the relationship in another's hands. And what that creates is a victim mentality, because it puts the control and power outside of us instead of having it within us. And so I want to take today to really talk about that and talk about the foundations of what I teach, because in case you haven't noticed, it's very different. So we're talking about the psychology of relationships today to start, to really understand how to have a healthy marriage relationship, because everything we've been taught, like I just shared, is really a 50-50 approach. And a 50-50 approach doesn't work, because fundamentally we have no control to change another person. We only have control to change ourselves. And no matter if I am working with women or I am working with men, that is the overall and overarching message of what I teach. You do not have control to change another. You only have control to change yourself. This was a profound and transformational awakening that I had when I began working with my mentor, because everything I had done in therapy and counseling had been putting the blame outside of me onto someone else, which kept me very stuck in my life, very stuck in my marriage, and did not allow me to have any constructive, permanent, long-term change in myself, in my marriage, and in my life. And so that's become my passion in teaching women and teaching men to be able to create the change you seek by working on yourself, because it's true that we only have control to change ourselves, but we have to be taught how to put that into practice and really understand our humanness. As I get into the psychology of relationships today, I like to give this reminder every once in a while that my message is meant for women who are open-minded, want to see themselves as the problem in their marriages, and want to change and can see that they're the problem. They just haven't had a way to really change in the ways that they want. My message is also for good men that are hardworking, responsible by nature, want to do what they can to make their wives happy, even though that doesn't work. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. And are kind, thoughtful, loving men. That's who my message is for. My message is not meant for couples that are in a dysfunctional place in their marriage or relationship. It's for couples who have a normal range of issues and challenges, like I speak about in my videos, behind closed doors, but they want to make things work. They're just lost and don't know how to navigate through these issues and challenges, and the things that they've been trying, such as marriage counseling, such as reading the self-help books, aren't working for them, and they want a new approach. So this is not meant, my message and the things I talk about are not meant for abusive relationships. There are plenty of women who are on the high end of the issues that I talk about, and very toxic and very emotionally abusive in their relationships. There are also narcissistic men and bad boys out there who are abusive to women. That's not who my message is for. So I like to give that reminder from time to time. If you want to check out a video where I go more in depth about what a good man is, and how to know if you're married to a good man, I did a live stream, I don't know, probably a month ago, on what is a good man. And so that's a great video to check out, where I go more in depth into that differentiation of who my message is for. So the psychology of relationships, as I understand it, and what has worked for me in my life and has worked for the hundreds of people that I have worked with over the last decade, that is a totally new perspective on how to approach relationships, how to approach marriage, that is fundamental to what I teach. The psychology of relationships is that how we experience our marriage is based on and a reflection of the internal experience that we have of ourselves. That's the only way that we can create change in a relationship, is to understand that our marriage, and that's the relationship I want to focus on today, but this applies to all relationships, but that our marriage is a reflection of the internal experience of ourselves. And what I mean by that is our internal emotional state. And that's what we have control over to change. As long as my relationship is because of external factors, as long as it's because of my experiences, because of my spouse or my partner, I have no control to change my experience. I have put that power and control into their hands. But when I understand that my marriage is a reflection of my internal emotional state, then that is something that I can do something about. And there's a psychological term that I like to use from time to time to explain this, because what I teach in the psychology of relationships really gives us a choice. It gives us a new choice and a new framework to live from in our lives and live from in our relationships. And that psychological concept is internal or external locus of control. As humans, we're all born with an external locus of control, meaning we look to the people, the circumstances, the things in our lives as that's what determines our experience. And that's what determines how we turn out. That's what determines how our lives turn out. And when we have an external locus of control, we put ourselves in a position of having no control over our experience and no control over the outcomes of our lives. And so what I teach in the psychology of relationships is based on an internal locus of control, knowing that I don't have control to change the people and things and circumstances in my life, but I do have control over myself and to change myself. And having an internal locus of control means that I determine my experience and I determine the outcomes in my life. And that puts us in control and is an empowering framework from which we can view marriage and from which we can view life. And that is everything that I teach comes from that perspective. And again, whether I'm working with good men or whether I'm working with women, we have to shift our framework so that we can take back our power and control. We have to shift that to an internal locus of control. And that's how we can make relationships work and make them constructive. So the key is, though, what we have to understand is that men and women are wired differently. And we all know that men and women are very different from each other, and we are wired very differently. So the psychology of relationships is that my relationship is an expression of my internal experience, which puts us in that internal locus of control. We need to understand those differences between men and women and the differences between a man's internal experience of himself and a woman's internal experience of herself in the marriage. The man's internal state, a good man's internal state that keeps him trapped in the relationship and unable to make constructive changes for himself. A good man is a problem solver, and he's pragmatic, and he views the issues and challenges in the marriage and in the relationship from a place of, what do I need to do to fix the problem? And a good man unknowingly falls for the brainwashing that happens from his wife, that he is the problem in the relationship. And so a good man gets stuck in the cycle of, what do I need to do? What am I doing wrong? That my wife is distant, she's cold, she says everything's fine, but I know everything is not fine. And he hears the things she maybe says or non-verbally says that he needs to be doing to change the relationship so she can be happy. And a good man stays unknowingly in that trap and cycle. And so a good man, his internal state begins to be, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I ever do anything right? And he begins to feel very, very weak in himself in the relationship. And we're going to talk about the solution to that a little bit later in the video. So be sure to stay with me, because there's something that a good man can do about that. So he is no longer being brainwashed. And it's really important that good men know that. I can't tell you how common it is. And it actually happened this week, where I talked to good men who reach out that they're interested in working with me, interested in this approach. And they say things along the line of, if my wife would just tell me what the issues really are, I will fix them. And I actually had a good man this week say, I actually asked my wife, just tell me what it is I need to do. Tell me what it is, and I will fix it, because that is a good man's nature. And this man shared with me, I told my wife that, and she just told me I should just know. I should just know what I need to do to fix it. And I can't tell you how many times I have heard that from good men. That's the orientation a good man is coming from. A woman's internal state, and the difference with a woman is that our internal state is not to be problem solvers and is not to fix the issues. our internal state is one of emotional drama and emotional chaos. And I wanted to share with you, I had a group of 20 women together, and I asked them, 20 married women, and I asked them, what is your experience of yourself internally, emotionally, and having what I call, and we're going to talk about this in here in just a moment, as the solution for women. And I want to clarify a little bit about emotional intelligence. And I had women describe, what is it like? What's your internal state like in your marriage with low emotional intelligence? And these are some of the things they shared with me that I want to share with you today. This is a woman's internal state that we get lost in. I'm disconnected and scattered. I'm reactive, irritable, and needy. I'm abrasive and unpleasant to be around. I cannot control what comes out of my mouth. I have no tolerance or patience. I have emotional meltdowns. I throw fits and I'm rash. I get cold and mean. I spin out and worry and made up scenarios. I am never satisfied. I am unhappy and feel victimized. This is a woman's internal state in her marriage. And from that place, that's where, as women, we place the blame on our husbands and think it's something they're doing to create this experience of ourselves. And it's something that they need to change, that they need to fix for this to change in ourselves. That's our external locus of control, that then we get caught in actually being victims and having victim mentality and spinning out in blame. And that's where we get stuck, and we're never able to change our marriage because we want our husbands to change. And it's that experience of low emotional intelligence that I just shared that creates our lens and perspective as women. And ladies, can you imagine feeling this way in yourself and knowing yourself as this? Can you imagine the perspective that creates of your husband? I know for me, when I lived in this place, it doesn't mean I never go here. I've said many times, and I'll say it many more times, I'm a human. I'm not a machine, and I'm a woman. I'm not a machine. So I have to catch myself when this is my internal experience and then use the tools that I teach to be constructive and be in control of my experience. But when this is where I was living from, being reactive and irritable and needy and disconnected and spinning out in worry and made up scenarios, never being satisfied, always unhappy in my marriage, that created a very negative lens of my husband, because that's the lens and perspective that we see out of. And then our husbands buy into that lens we've created, and they're constantly seeking and trying to fix things and make things better. But no matter what they do, it doesn't fix anything because they are not the problem. Ladies, we are the problem. In a relationship with a good man, women are the problem, not the man. It's this internal experience of ourselves that creates the issues and the problems, point blank. And so when we take control of our emotional state, that's where we can actually see change in the relationship. That's the internal locus of control. So I want to talk about the solution. If our relationship is based on, and the experience we have of our relationship is based on the internal experience of ourselves, I want to give the solution. And first I'm going to talk to the ladies, and then I will talk to the men, because there's a different solution and what a man needs to know about his internal state, because it's not this of a woman's internal emotional state of low emotional intelligence. And so the solution for women is developing high emotional intelligence. And I've seen some comments recently, because I use this term. It's very relatable. And it's a really, really simple way to understand the solution that I teach, especially for women. And I've seen some comments recently of, I know you use emotional intelligence because it speaks to women and your target audience, but women use emotional intelligence as a weapon against men, that men don't have any emotional intelligence. And I understand that, because the the falseness we live in as women is believing that we have high emotional intelligence. And setting the record straight, women have no emotional intelligence. The reason that as women we want to believe we have emotional intelligence is because we are emotional. Because we are emotional as women, we want to think we have high emotional intelligence. But the truth is the fact that we are highly emotional is actually the biggest indicator that we have very low emotional intelligence, because being emotional is having no control over our emotional state, which is low emotional intelligence. High emotional intelligence is the ability to be pragmatic, to see things realistically, and to make choices and respond to life not from an emotional place. It's the ability to be in control of our emotional state and operate in life from that place. And so, women, we have it so backward to think that because we are emotional, that we have emotional intelligence. We have it completely flipped. The fact that we are emotional and we let our emotions run the issues and problems in our marriage, and we run off being highly emotional in our lives, lets us know we have no control over our emotional state, which is the definition of low emotional intelligence, the inability to be in control of our emotional state. So what we have to learn to do in our marriages is to learn to be in control of our emotional state. And what women need to know is that we have all the control and power to make a marriage so successful and to have it be so happy and wonderful, and just, it's almost indescribable how amazing your marriage can be with a good man, simply by learning to be in control of your emotional state in a constructive, genuine way. And that's the best part to me, and why I like the concept of emotional intelligence is, one, if I know that it's my emotional state as a woman that is the problem in the marriage, then I have that internal locus of control, and I can change, and I can actually change the marriage. So that's one reason I really like the concept of emotional intelligence. The second reason I like it is that emotional intelligence, unlike our intellect and intelligence that we are born with, emotional intelligence is a developed skill. It's something that we can learn, and it's a skill set that everyone has the capacity to learn. Good men already operate from a place of high emotional intelligence. It is the biggest lie and the biggest myth out there that men are emotionally inept, emotionally unattuned, and have low emotional intelligence. I saw an atrocity of an article a few weeks ago doing some research. The title was something like, "Men, if you want a healthy relationship or a healthy marriage, you need to learn to develop high emotional intelligence." It broke my heart to see that article, because it could not be more false. Good men are pragmatic. They're problem solvers. They will do anything to fix the issue. They very easily can operate from a place of being pragmatic, set their emotions aside, and focus on the big picture and focus on the reality. That's why it's so wonderful as women that if we can learn to develop high emotional intelligence to be in control of our emotional state, watch my mic here, and we're married to a good man, that's where we can have this incredible dance in this incredible relationship we never even imagined possible, that we can actually have a truly happy marriage, truly, truly, truly happy marriage, simply by working on ourselves to develop high emotional intelligence, to be in control of our emotional state, which makes us feel really good about who we are. And it gives us a sense of self, and it allows us to create a healthy relationship with ourselves. Instead of feeling disconnected, scattered, reactive, irritable, needy, in a constant state of worry about made up scenarios, as a woman, when we develop high emotional intelligence internally, we feel grounded, we feel at peace, we feel in control, vibrant, alive. We feel supported in ourselves. We have the ability to see things for the reality. Key piece, when we live from high emotional intelligence, we live from a place of taking accountability and responsibility for our experiences, taking accountability and responsibility for ourselves, that we actually have a responsibility for who we are and how we show up in life and how we show up in our marriage. And from that place, that's the internal experience we have. And it creates a whole new lens and perspective of your marriage. From low emotional intelligence, we have the lens and perspective in the marriage that our husband is the problem, and blaming our husbands and constantly working to try to get them to change. And it creates a very, very negative, destructive lens of the relationship and the marriage. However, when we're coming from an internal experience of high emotional intelligence, we feel good about who we are. We want to be problem solvers. We take accountability. We're grounded. We're at peace in ourselves. That creates the lens through which we see the marriage. And then we can actually see our husbands, who are good men, through that lens. We see their kindness. We see their thoughtfulness. We focus on the good things. We focus on what's to come and the possibilities. Whereas when we're in low emotional intelligence, we focus on everything that we feel is wrong. We focus on everything negative. We're critical. We nag. We're controlling. We worry. And that's the lens we create. And then that's the relationship we get. But from the lens of high emotional intelligence, that's where we can have a really happy, healthy marriage. And it's so much simpler. If a woman works on herself, by the way, emotional intelligence, having high emotional intelligence, feeling good about who you are and being in control of your emotional state is what allows us as women to be happy, which I define as having a healthy relationship with yourself. And I can promise you this, ladies, all a good man wants for his wife is for her to be happy. And good men have fallen for the fallacy of the quote, happy wife, happy life, and have believed if I can do something to make my wife happy, then life will be good. Simply not true. It will never, ever, ever work. However, if as a woman, we take responsibility for our happiness and we're creating that in ourselves by having a healthy relationship with who we are, by developing high emotional intelligence, and we're happy, that quote, happy wife, happy life, becomes true. It's just that your husband could never do it for you. Nobody knew that quote meant, no, the woman is responsible for her happiness. And if she takes responsibility for her happiness and she's happy, marriage and life are a dream and wonderful. It doesn't mean that there are never challenges or ups and downs. That's the reality of life, and that's the reality of marriage. It doesn't mean that everything is sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows all the time. But it means that you can work through the challenges and have a dance with your husband and feel good in the marriage and it be the place that you want to be. So it's so much easier. I've said this before. It's so much easier, ladies, if we work on ourselves to be happy. It's so that's how simple it is. You don't need to work on communication. You don't need to work on trust. You don't need to work on intimacy. You don't need to work on the symptoms of the marriage. If you are married to a good man and you work on yourself to be in control of your emotional state and feel good about who you are and have a healthy relationship with yourself, which I call the journey of being happy, marriage is good. That's how simple it is. So that's the solution for women. And there's a different solution to the psychology of relationships for a good man. A good man must also know that he can shift and change his experience of the relationship, even being married to a woman who is unhappy and emasculating. And he doesn't change and shift his experience for his wife. He does it for himself and his own sense of being a man and his own sense of being happy and at peace in himself. So men, you have high emotional intelligence in the relationship, and you can know that because you are a problem solver. And if your wife would just tell you what to do, or she has told you what to do, you try to fix it. You want the problem solved. You don't want the drama and the emotional chaos that your wife creates in the relationship. You want a solution. And good men are pragmatic, which means being able to see issues and problems without the emotion, which drives women crazy and pisses us off. I had a man share recently that when he tries to get a direct answer from his wife and like, can you just tell me without all the emotion and all the baggage around it? She got livid. And we get livid because we live in that comfort of our emotional chaos. And we feel unsafe and unprotected without that emotional chaos. So that difference in us, it's like we completely miss each other. But men, in order to change your internal experience of what do I need to do to make my wife happy? What do I need to do to fix this so she's just nice? That's all good men want. Can you just be nice? Can you just treat me with some respect and just be nice in the relationship and just be happy in yourself? That's all a good man wants. It's very simple. It's very reasonable. But how a good man has to change that internal state of himself of always wanting to fix the problems in the relationship and running up empty again and again and again, which causes him to feel defeated and weak and like he can never do anything right and that he's wrong and he's the problem. Good men have to have the solution to change that because your wife isn't going to be able to change that in you. And so you have to be empowered to change that for yourself. Again, that's the internal locus of control. In the first place that you have to come to and be crystal clear in, which is difficult for good men, because most good men, in spite of how their wife has treated them in the emasculating ways and the withholding and all the things I talk about in my videos, likely, if things haven't gone too far, he still adores his wife and still sees all the good and positive things about who she is. And he really does believe, what am I doing wrong? So a good man has to know that you are not the problem in the relationship. Your wife and her unhappiness is the core issue in your marriage and in your relationship, period. Which no one in marriage counseling and no one in our society is dealing with. The counselors buy into the woman's story. They don't know and haven't been trained any differently. So you have to know you are not the problem That's step one. You have to know you are not the problem. Your wife is the problem. However, you can't get stuck in being a victim to realizing that your wife is the problem and getting stuck in anger and the unfairness of it. You have to have a way to be empowered and have that internal locus of control. Otherwise, you're waiting for your wife to change or something to be different about the marriage for your experience to change. And when you get stuck in that place, that's where you become weaker in yourself and the emasculation works. So you have to become empowered, not for your wife, but for yourself. So you don't get stuck in that place. And the solution for a good man in the psychology of relationships and what we're talking about today is you have to reconnect with who you are as a good man and to know who you are as a good man. One of the saddest parts of us as women and our unhappiness and how we emasculate good men is they lose sight of who they are as good men because they buy into the brainwashing of their wives that they are the problem. So one of the very, very, very first things that I do with a man when he comes through my men's course for marriage is to help him reconnect with who he is as a good man. You have to reconnect with that part. And one of the best ways I like to use this example, because it comes up a lot when I speak with good men, is that you can go to work and feel competent and confident in who you are and your ability to do your job and feel competent and confident around your peers. And then you can go home. And because of the environment your wife has created with her unhappiness, then feel like a shell of a man. And the solution for you and your marriage from that place is regaining your confidence and competence in the relationship by knowing who you are as a good man. And your wife's emasculation is a mirror, and it doesn't make it right and it doesn't make it okay. But you can use it in a constructive way as a mirror to expose the limitations and weaknesses in yourself that allow the emasculation to work so that you can strengthen those weaknesses and limitations. And then the emasculation no longer works. And you use that as your ability to find your strength and confidence within yourself in the marriage, regardless of if your wife ever changes or not. And of course, good men have the choice whether they want to stay in the relationship or not, depending on the level of which their wife operates in these woman ways that I speak about. What is the most common that I do see is that good men want to do whatever they can to make the relationship work, even if their wife never changes. And then some men choose, no, this isn't for me. And I don't want to stay in this relationship. And that is reasonable too. But the truth is, in working with good men, because of their values and what's important to them and other circumstances, they want to find a way to stay, but be able to find that peace within themselves and regain their strength as a man, regardless of who their wife is and how she shows up in the relationship. And so when a good man works to, one, know his wife is the problem, that he is not the problem, to reconnect with himself as a good man, and to use his wife's woman ways and the emasculation as a way to expose the weaknesses and limitations in himself, then he can strengthen himself and find that confidence. And wrapping up, now that you've heard the psychology of relationships and the different solutions and the fundamentals of a healthy marriage relationship, here's what I want the women to know. And I've said it already, so I'm going to say it briefly. If you work to change yourself, if you're open-minded and willing and want to see the things that I teach women, and you work on yourself to develop high emotional intelligence and be happy in yourself, then you will have and you're married to a good man, not a bad boy or a narcissistic man. And most women are married to good men. You will have the happiest marriage you could ever imagine. What I want a good man to know is if your wife is not willing to look at herself and change, by you, if you choose to stay, then what you can have by learning to build your strength in yourself and using the emasculation as a teacher for you to build that strength in yourself, then a good man can learn to manage the expectations in the relationship, to accept his wife for who she is, and do the things you need to do to care for yourself, to be happy in yourself so that you can be at peace in the relationship, and also know that you are not crazy and see the reality of the dynamics at play. So you're no longer falling for the brainwashing and the manipulation that comes from your wife. And in that, you will find a strength in yourself greater than you could ever imagine. And I can think of a good man that I worked with who he shared with me. He's saying, 75% of the relationship is good. But this 25%, the emasculation, the withholding, the manipulation, the selfishness, is very, very difficult. And so he came through my program and I helped him and taught him and educated him on putting this into practice, what I've shared today. And he was able to accept the 25% that he knew wasn't going to change because his wife was unwilling to see these things about herself. And so he's at peace in the relationship and accepting of that 25% and focuses on the 75% and has a functioning, normal working marriage without being emasculated any longer. And that's what, in managing expectations, if a good man is married to a woman who isn't willing to change and work on these things in herself, then that is the outcome if you choose to stay. So ladies, stop blaming your husbands and open your eyes to the things that I talk about in our woman ways and our unhappiness, to work on yourself, to give yourself an incredible, amazing, happy marriage. It's so much simpler. And that has been my journey in my marriage. Obviously, that's why I'm here and share these things, is working on myself. And the changes I've seen in my marriage have been nothing short of miraculous. And I can't imagine it any other way. But that's what I wanted to talk about today, and really the emphasis on the psychology of relationships that's focused on having an internal locus of control as opposed to an external locus of control where we work on the symptoms and trying to change the other person, because that's where we give our power away. That's where we create a codependency, and that's where we become victims and blaming the other for our experience. We have to understand the psychology of relationships is that relationships are an expression of our internal experience. And when we change our internal experience, we change our experience of the relationship, whether or not the other person changes or not. And again, and wrapping up, I said this in the beginning, my message isn't for dysfunctional, abusive, highly abusive, and physically abusive relationships. It's for normal, everyday people like me who love each other, are trying to make things work. And this is a way. This is a way, because I know it's frustrating trying to do all the other things, the books and the marriage counseling, and just spinning around in circles. So thank you all so much for joining. I forgot to say this in the beginning. Please like the video. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to my channel. If you are not, and if you are, thank you so much. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. I think that's it. I'm going to take a look into the chat box, see what's going on in there. If anything stands out to address. Hi, Mona. Nice to see you. Mona's in there in the chat box. She does so good at this of asking people to like the video. I really appreciate that. And Stevio in there too. Wonderful. All right. Just going through. You are welcome, David. David said, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. You're welcome. It's good to be here. Vince, I'm in Colorado. Are there any, and hi, I'm in Colorado too. Are there any services to help my wife's trauma that are faith-based? I don't have, trauma is not something within the wheelhouse that I work with. I would, a good source would maybe be Psychology Today to look at trauma-based counselors here in Colorado. That's where I would start. Thank you, Steve. Men can't read minds. I don't know a single man who can. That must have been in response to when I was talking about, when a woman says you should just know what to do to fix things. Gosh, that's so true. We can't. Men can't read minds. Another good question: is it low emotional intelligence, or is it a matter of low emotional awareness? That's a good question. So really, when we live in low emotional intelligence, we are living from an external locus of control, that the people, the circumstances of our lives, our past, all these external influences that we can't change, that makes us victims because we've placed that power and control outside of us in our external world. And when we are victims and we've placed that power and control in our external world, we have no self-awareness. We have no ability to see and understand ourselves and how we are showing up and how we are creating our experiences and the outcomes in our life, because our focus is externally. And if my focus is external, on my husband, on my family, on my past, on my upbringing, then there's not even any awareness to look at myself. I like to share this from time to time. When I started this work, when I met my mentor and he helped me to see that I am the problem in my life and therefore the solution, I thought I had so much self-awareness because I had been to all like 6 years of therapy. By the way, if you need to be in therapy for 6 years, it's not working. Just a little side note, but I had done a lot of therapy. I had done, as you guys have heard, all the woo-woo and spiritual stuff. And I thought I was just so self-aware. I thought I was this like just very, very enlightened human. And my mentor said, you have no self-awareness. And of course, I got a little pissed and got in resistance, but that let me know we were going in the direction of truth. And as I began to develop an internal locus of control to know that I'm the one that determines my experience of myself and my life, that's when I began to develop self-awareness. And it was through that path of developing high emotional intelligence and the focus being on me to understand my experience and the problems and be the solution. That's where I developed self-awareness. So thank you. That's a good question. Does this blame come from what we do as men is never enough? The blame comes from a core level. Again, I won't repeat myself too much, but the blame comes from our external locus of control as women. And again, as humans, we're all born with that external locus of control. So we have to look at victim mentality in ourselves and the blame we've created in our lives. So it doesn't come from that what you do as men is never enough. That's the victims, what I call the victim story that as women we create in our marriages. The blame was there much, much earlier, just from our own humanness. And that's what men have to break is men. Who you are as a good man and your thoughtfulness and care and kindness is enough. And it's the brainwashing that your wife has made you believe that what you do is never enough. So that's your wife problem, not your problem. I'll come down here. How does a good man get his wife to understand that she has low emotional intelligence? Thank you, Mike. Good question. How does a good man get his wife to understand that she has low emotional intelligence and is the problem in the relationship without causing a major conflict? Great question. That's that internal locus of control. There is no way. No one has any power to make someone understand anything. The only way that you can help someone to understand something is if they are open-minded, they want to change, and they want to look at themselves. So I teach good men, you have to have a constructive way to test your wife to know what kind of woman she is. And some men you already know if your wife is willing to change or not, if she is willing to have a level of self-awareness, if she is open-minded. So you have to be willing to take the risk. If you're not sure, you have to be willing to take that risk to bring these things up with your wife. And you might find one of my videos and say, hey, will you watch this? Guys, I have been, in the best way, overwhelmed in a good way of the women reaching out to me. They might not comment a lot on the videos. They're watching quietly and they're sitting back. I have had so many women reaching out because their husband showed them one of my videos, and they're, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, are reaching out genuinely saying, oh my gosh, my husband showed me this. I know these things are true. And that won't be all women, but it's happening. So you have to take the risk of the major conflict to bring this up with your wife. And if you're a good man, you'll do it the best you can from that caring place. And if your wife blows up and she's pissed, that's where you can know, okay, I took the risk, that happened. I know the kind of woman I'm married to. She's not willing to see these things about herself. But if she says, she still might be pissed at the beginning, but then comes around and says, thank you. I've sat with this. It's been a hard pill to swallow, but I see these things. What can I do? Then you have an open-minded wife who is willing to change. But that's the risk you have to take, is stepping into, I call it the lion's den. And what can happen for you if you do it from that constructive place is that's a first step in regaining your strength and confidence as a man, because you can know if it creates a major conflict and your wife blows up, you have to know it's her. You didn't do anything wrong. She's going to make you feel like you did something wrong, but you have to be grounded in knowing you did nothing wrong, that you reasonably stood up for yourself and fought for yourself and fought for your wife and fought for the marriage. And it came from a good intentioned place. And when you're grounded in knowing that, that's where you create this strength. Thank you. Well, I just saw Mona put a comment. The women are always watching, even if they don't comment or sub. It's true. It's really, really, really true. So, all right, guys. Change is never comfortable. CVO says change is never comfortable. It's not. Change is uncomfortable. And so for women and men, it's learning to be comfortable in that uncomfortable, to take risks, because that's the only way that we will change. And that's from that internal locus of control. So thank you all so much for being here and for the wonderful questions. And commentary and respectfulness in the chat box. Thank you. And I hope everyone has a nice weekend wherever you are. It's beautiful here in Colorado. It's supposed to be 75 tomorrow, which I'm so thrilled about. So I'm going to enjoy the weekend with my husband. I hope you guys have a nice weekend, and I will see you again very soon. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out if you haven't already. And I will see you guys next Saturday, same time. So